Hey guys, Apav here, and welcome to my Call of Duty commentary. I've never done this before because I've never preferred like non-online commentary, like live commentary. However, this is Call of Duty, and everyone used to do this back in the day. I remember one of my friends that me and previously known Nsuzi used to play online with, and he started his own YouTube channel where it was just Call of Duty commentary. Real quick, I'm going to go over what I'm doing in multiplayer, and then I'm going to talk about the campaign. That's the reason I'm making this video. Just like the typical Call of Duty commentary, I'm not even going to be talking about what I'm doing in the video. So the multiplayer is exactly the same as any other Call of Duty. I thought it was going to be more like Medal of Honor Airborne with a health system and the maps being more like that. However, it's more like World at War, a little bit more fast-paced like the Modern Warfare games, but it's still pretty cool. You still have the crosshair, and it's typical Call of Duty. I thought maybe they'd change it up a bit. They do end up changing it up a bit, which you might see a little bit of this later in the video, where like in between matches, there's sort of like a hub world like in the first Destiny, only not as annoying and confusing as the first Destiny. There's also multiple different kinds of classes. I obviously chose Airborne because ever since I played Medal of Honor Airborne, I thought the Airborne was, freaking awesome. So I chose the Airborne. I don't know if it changes much, but that was like the class or the squad or whatever they called it I was a part of. This is my official YouTube PlayStation account that I'm playing on though, so I might choose something that I'll probably choose Airborne on my account that I play on personally. I don't do too well. My KD is probably 0.5 in both of these. I think that's how KD works. It's basically I die twice as much as I get kills, and I don't get killed or get many kills that often in these. It's more like 2 to 4 and stuff, but I just thought these are the first 3 games I've played in Call of Duty World War II. The beginning of the third one I was doing pretty good, so you'll see that hopefully near the end of this. Now the campaign, I really like the campaign. I've already beat it. I was going to do this like halfway through the campaign, but I didn't. I ended up beating it because I was so invested. I played a lot of Call of Duties for the story, believe it or not. I love games for their stories, but still having good gameplay, obviously. So previous to this, Call of Duty World at War Final Fronts was my favorite Call of Duty. It still is, just because the maps to me are very memorable. However, this probably has the best story in Call of Duty, at least in the World War II Call of Duties. I've never felt so connected to the characters without having to put like some blind favoritism. Like in Modern Warfare, my favorite character ended up being Soap. However, it wasn't really because they developed him as a character as much. It was just because I was like, oh, that guy's cool, he's going to be my favorite. Kind of like choosing a favorite sports team or something, where people are just like, oh, he's going to be my favorite. Or in if you're watching America's Got Talent, you might be like, okay, this is going to be my guy, even though he might not be the best and there might be more to come. So that's how I used to pick my favorite characters in Call of Duty. However, in this, I ended up loving all of them. At first I thought I was going to like, I don't remember his name, I believe it started with an S, the nerdy guy. I thought I was going to like him the most, and then there was a guy who kind of reminded me of Pearson from Final Fronts. I think his name was Pearson. That's weird because in this game there's a character named Pearson, but he reminded me of him. He was more rebellious, and after this game you're going to get to see some of the HQ is what they call it. I'm briefly looking through the gameplay as I'm speaking, but it's not going to be live because I keep pausing. So the story for the campaign was just really good. Usually they throw in like a lot of like, oh, main characters getting killed off, like a lot. They like to throw that into video games now to just make you feel emotional. Whereas this, they took a while to do like anything scary with the main characters that like had any real effect. But instead, how they substituted that was a lot of gore, just with random characters you never even hear their voice. Like your whole squad, say, is in this situation, and like let's say a bomb goes off or something, and you'd think all of them would be dead, but the only character who ends up getting dead is some character you've never seen before, and is usually in like some violent fashion, which I didn't really like that. I never liked it in video games where they just had random death. Like, if you could completely take out that person's death and it wouldn't affect the story at all, why are you showing me it? I'm not a big fan of gore. I know that it might not bother anyone, but if the campaign wasn't as gory as it was, it might end up being one of my favorite Call of Duties. I never beat Black Ops 2 or 3, and World at War and the first Black Ops I did struggle getting through because of just I didn't like the stories in the first place, but also they were really gory, especially World at War. This rivals World at War. They were definitely going back to World at War and not like Call of Duty 3 and all their T-rated titles. I also really enjoyed the ending. I'm not going to spoil anything, but they did a good job like summarizing World War II. Instead of all the other Call of Duties, you know, you gotta know your squad, or your, sorry if I'm using the wrong term, you gotta know the guys, and then the game sort of just ended with like the biggest battle or something. Whereas the epilogue was really good. I really liked how the story played out. If there's multiple endings, maybe I just got the good multiple ending. I don't know if there's multiple endings. You can peer. Okay, moving on to the gameplay. You can peer around corners like in Call of Duty Ghosts. Now, Ghosts, I believe people were telling me had multiple endings, but that was something I liked. It took a lot of inspiration from, well, one, Medal of Honor. It felt a lot like Medal of Honor, kind of mixed with Brothers in Arms, if you've ever played that game. The old Medal of Honors, obviously, the World War II Medal of Honors. And even, at one point, you play as a, I believe she was French, an undercover French lady, and I believe that's directly taken from Medal of Honor Underground. So it took a lot of inspiration from other World War II games. When I first started playing it, I noticed like things that were in Call of Duty 3 and World at War and stuff, just a lot of familiar things, and it wasn't that bad, but it gave me a hard time trying to figure out if it was fresh or not, which, coming out of it, I don't really feel like it was copying anything. It was just taking a lot of inspiration from a lot of different old World War II games, and this game was more of a fan service, I feel like, because it changed up Call of Duty even more than Call of Duty 3. It went back to a health bar system. There's no crosshairs in the campaign, which is odd because it's in the online mode, and the online mode also doesn't have a health bar. It's almost like online was made by Infinity Ward, where the campaign was made by a new group of people trying to do a throwback to the really old World War II games. I didn't really have a problem with the no crosshairs. I thought I would, but I looked down the sights a lot, and when I didn't look down the sights, it really did feel like you were hip firing because you didn't know where you were pointing the gun exactly. No double jump, obviously. I'm happy for that one. The guns. Okay, for some reason you can reload the M1 Garand. Like you don't have to fire every shot for the clip to ping out of it. I don't know why. All the other World War II games, except for maybe one Medal of Honor, maybe World at War, I'm not sure. All the ones I used to play, you couldn't reload the M1 Garand. I'm pretty sure that's accurate to real life. I could be wrong, and that might be why they changed it. But I really liked all the guns in this gameplay. You're not really going to be able to see it too much, but in the campaign, I enjoyed using the M1 Garand a lot, and the M1 Carbine, I have a feeling, is going to be cool for multiplayer, if you don't have to shoot them like 20 times to put someone down. I mean, that's why in real life the M1 Carbine was just an alternative to a pistol, because they considered it really underpowered back then. Oh, another odd thing is in online mode, they tutorialize you is the word I'm not sure if I came up with that, but I say that a lot. They tutorialized me a lot. Like you get tons of text, and you get this one person who says, I can't remember, what's it called, like a division, or, you know, when they have you choose which class you want to be, he's like, on this screen is the divisions you need to choose. Come up to the screen and choose a division. These are the divisions, and watch the division video. It just felt like they were really talking down to me in that segment, and I don't know why they felt the need to explain the online mode after going through the campaign, and the campaign doesn't have a tutorial. This is probably the first Call of Duty in a long time that doesn't have a tutorial. They usually start you off like at, you know, the training, I forget what it's called, like, you know, you're in the training, but in this they start you off on D-Day, which, Medal of Honor, Final Fronts, no, that's a Call of Duty game. It's right next to me, hang on. Medal of Honor Front Lines, I believe, starts on D-Day. And I believe I saw a comparison to that on YouTube somewhere, where someone compared the Medal of Honor and Call of Duty from, like, you know, 15 years apart or whatever. The first mission in the campaign, I think, is the most goriest. It was, like, I don't like gore, so I was contemplating stopping playing the game because it was just very violent, and I know that might not affect a lot of people, especially if you preferred Black Ops and World at War, and didn't grow up on the T games, or you just preferred the M games. I wasn't allowed to play M games till I was 13, and at that point MW2 was the one that was popular, so I played that the most, and that was, you know, violent, but just violent enough to be rated M. It wasn't too horrible, but once again, there wasn't too much killing off of characters you got attached to. I'm not going to say there wasn't any, or there was, because I'm not going to ruin the story. You know, it didn't feel like they were just killing off main characters to make you emotional. Like, they weren't, like, playing with your emotions, like, the moment you met a character, they died or something. Medal of Honor Airborne had this moment in it that has always stuck with me, because they do somewhat do this in this game, and I always hate it when they have pointless deaths. I know it's a war game, but you don't have to, like, simulate war. It's also a game. You don't have to make me feel, like, really bad. Anyways, in Medal of Honor Airborne, there's this guy who gets shot, and then you just hear him screaming in the background as a tank runs him over. And you don't know that character, but it's just like, why'd you throw that in there? And I always hate it when they throw in, like, screaming, because, like, you really sympathize with that. And I know it's not real. That's what I keep telling myself. And the gore, it still bothers me, but it doesn't bother me as much when it's not a character that they focus the emotions on too much, just because I kind of overlook it. Like, I don't even really pay attention to it. Back in World at War, I focused on it, and I was like 12, and it really freaked me out. But since I've played World at War many years ago, I just know those effects. Like, it doesn't, like, I don't think of it as being realistic, because I know that it's just a pre-programmed effect that on any character, if you hit them in a certain place with a certain gun, it's going to do this certain thing. So I never really paid attention to it. You don't really notice it after the first few levels, and then you get wrapped up in the story. And I really loved how I keep saying this, I really love how the characters, like, communicated with each other, and you get to know each character and sympathize with each character, and sort of know their backstory too. There's really a lot more story to this than a lot of other Call of Duties. Maybe Advanced Warfare and Infinite Warfare had more story to them, but those just seemed way too ridiculous, and I never played those. They're also not much of a typical Call of Duty game. This is more typical Call of Duty, and they changed up a lot of the you know, core gameplay with the health and the crosshairs and a bunch of stuff that Call of Duty's had for years. It still felt like a Call of Duty game, whereas Advanced Warfare and Infinite Warfare didn't. It just seemed like a techno game. I don't even know what it was going for. Also, there was a female character who I believe was with the British, which kind of confused me because I didn't think back then many militaries accepted women. Maybe the British did, and that's why they had that in there. I don't know. And then the French lady, but that was all the way back from Call of Duty 3 when they had that. I think they had a French resistance fighter who was a lady. Oh, it would be cool if I looked back in that and the voices matched, like if the character names matched and they're the same character. That would be funny. A crossover from an old Call of Duty game. The story, again, flipping back and forth, sorry about that. It starts on D-Day and it goes all the way to the end of the war, and that's how it covers the story of World War II so well, because it starts unveiling like the horrors of what was happening in Nazi Germany after the war, because all the Allies didn't exactly know what was going on in Nazi Germany, and even a lot of the Germans in Nazi Germany didn't know exactly what was going on. They did do somewhat of an unveiling of that to the characters, and it was just interesting to see that, where it was sort of telling history, but not in the same fashion as the old Call of Duties did. I believe Call of Duty 2 actually used to take clips from the History Channel or something like that. I could have sworn in the original Call of Duties they did have like black and white clips and some commentary over them. They also did that in Medal of Honor, so I know it's in there too. Sorry, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. I was going to make a list, but I'm trying to get this up by Monday, and it's already Saturday, and I'm going to be gone tonight, so I gotta at least record this and then edit it on Sunday. Lastly, a few things. The menu is very basic. It reminds me of Call of Duty World at War. Like, as soon as it clicked on, I'm like, okay, campaign, multiplayer, zombies. This is exactly like World at War. It was definitely trying to give back to the people who like that game. And I really liked this overall game. I know my last video, I railed on Call of Duty. I was really upset with them, and I still don't like how they released a game that you can't access without an internet connection, so you might as well install it instead of buy the disc. I purchased physical copies for the idea that they will always be around, whereas in 20 years from now, I don't know if the PS4 is going to be able to access PlayStation Network, and if it can't, then you won't be able to install the Call of Duty update. And say right now you're 15, and when you're 35 or something, you want to buy an old PS4, like how people now are buying NESs and Sega Genesis and stuff. And then you're like, oh, I want to play Call of Duty World War II. Well, if the PS4 is no longer able to access the internet or PlayStation Network, you won't be able to play Call of Duty World War II because it needs to update as soon as you purchase it. You might just say, oh, well, I'll just have a PC and I'll play it on the computer because there might be a way to purchase it online. Hopefully our Steam accounts won't be down by then, but maybe there'll be something new. You know, Call of Duty keeps re-releasing games that are only like 6 years old, so... Or, I mean, they're planning on it. They've already re-released Modern Warfare, which is like 10 years old now, which is pretty crazy. But I'm pretty sure they're going to do the same for MW2 and MW3. I wish they would have released them all together, like in a trilogy pack, but, you know, they like money. Okay, I think we're getting close to the end here. Let me just try to patch in some holes off the top of my head. There's a couple vehicle segments. Most of the levels you play as like the same people, whereas in a lot of old Call of Duties, you know, it's switched between the Americans and the Europeans, and I believe there are 2 different Americans in World at War, where like ones were fighting in Japan, ones were fighting in Europe, then you played as the Europeans, and then I know in some you play as the French. Anyways, there's a lot going on, and maybe they're British. Anyways, usually there's a lot of different groups, and it's hard to familiarize with certain characters, whereas it's the same group throughout the entire game mostly. So you really get to know the characters, and I actually prefer that. And I love this one part where one of the guys said, we're all Americans, because having that in a game where they typically like try to include everyone around the world, I just found that interesting that they put that in there, and it had even more meaning at that point, simply because you were following along that group. And I have a feeling even if you're not an American, you might have felt kind of not proud about that, maybe, where like the Americans are sticking together. So like, I don't know, anytime you see people sticking together, it's cool. There's also some cool friendships with the French and this one part, which again, I'm not going to talk about like the details of the story because I don't want to ruin anything. And I guess the last thing I have to talk about is my previous opinion, which is what I was doing. Yes, sorry, my brain just scattered all over the place. I gave it a bad review, or not review, but initial impressions. That was the point of that video, was initial impressions, and I couldn't give my impressions because you didn't sell me a game on a disc. I'm sorry. But, so I titled that video, Do Not Buy Call of Duty World War II. And the reason I titled it that way was because I was upset at 1:30 in the morning, and I never actually said in that video, don't buy Call of Duty World War II, but, I mean, if you want a game on a disc, don't buy it. I probably wouldn't have bought this if I knew that prior and no one had told me how good the campaign was, and the online's pretty good as well. So I don't hate it, okay? It's a good game. I wish they released it like on a true physical release, because it upsets me even more, because I'm like, I like it, I want to own it, but I don't feel like I actually own it. Just the way my mind works, where I want like a pure physical thing that I'll be able to play no matter what. I always like analog alternatives. I know it's still digital, but it's as analog as you can get with modern gaming, is having a physical disc that you can play without internet. So I would recommend it if you like Call of Duty World at War and all the old World War II games, as long as you're not deathly afraid of gore. And there's no way of turning it off. That was another thing that they changed. And if you don't mind the physical release not really being a physical release, plus it's having tons of updates, and it's kind of complicated in that way, and it takes up a lot of data, or data, I meant like storage space. But it is a good game, and I will be playing it hopefully for a Let's Play, or maybe even on multiplayer with a friend. Oh, and another reason why I gave that original first impressions was because I was intending on doing a lot of videos with this game, and I was like, okay, just make a good game, put it on a disc. It was my requirements, and they didn't really put it on a disc, so I was really upset about that. But I think I'm still going to make a lot of videos on this. Hopefully not back to back like these last two, but I've been rambling for half an hour now. Hopefully I can chop this down so it all fits. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.